Hey guys, it's the Annotator. I've been sick all week. It's been a lovely week, but I am back and I'm going to be talking today about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a movie that aims to celebrate movies made by one of the most celebrated American writers and directors of movies, at least of this generation, Quentin Tarantino. Specifically, I wanted to talk about why I think that this is the most boring and least effective Quentin Tarantino movie. Let me ask you a slew of rhetorical questions that I'm going to answer in approximately 20 seconds. What is story? Like, what makes story different from just plucking out a 2-hour window in a random person's life? What if instead of storytelling, there was a machine that randomly picked out a 2-hour pocket of time in my life while I was sleeping, or sitting at my desk at work, or lounging on my couch watching a movie? Would that be compelling? No, obviously. Story is the accounting of what Robert McKee calls a quote-unquote story event, and how a character or characters react to that event. Robert McKee, author of a book called Story, defines a story event as such that creates a meaningful change in the life situation of a character. Stories generally have key points and lead to a climax, a showdown between the protagonist and the antagonist, even if the antagonist, the bad guy, is something abstract like a feeling of hopelessness or alcoholism. Whatever force is the biggest obstruction to the protagonist's desired endpoint. Characterization, as I've delved into in previous videos, is a character overcoming a personal flaw that he or she may have been oblivious to in order to achieve a desire or goal or need. What characters want and need is what compels us while watching a film. The Inglourious Basterds, for example, want to eradicate Nazis and kill Hitler. And a lot of characters sacrifice and overcome a lot of shit to keep moving toward that goal. Django, for example, wants to rescue his wife from a slave trader. And, ditto. That brings me back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And here's my issue with this movie. Our characters undergo no fundamental change, nor does the story have a defined or implied destination within the world that it builds. And that's a critical distinction, within its own world, because Tarantino uses a real-life historical event as the destination, but it's not a destination our characters have an influence on throughout the story, and they're not even aware of it, nor is there any story-relevant indication to the audience. We know where it's going to lead if we're familiar with the massacre that takes place, but independent of anything we see or hear on screen. And that's the film's only sustainable source of drama and or tension. The protagonists aren't moving towards something, they're being moved towards something. That's massively different. The result is us following two characters aimlessly for 200 minutes until they coincidentally intersect with that destination. We might like the characters, we might even learn a lot about them, their deficiencies, their motivations, but it's unengaging because their personal goals are separate from the destination and they never pursue them actively anyway. If they attain them at the end, which is very arguable, it's by coincidence. Leo DiCaprio is a TV star wash-up named Rick Dalton, who's fallen from series lead to essentially villain of the week, or the heavy. He wants to get his reputation and career back to spotlight, but doesn't have to sacrifice anything except a trip to Italy to do so, and the opportunity is offered to him, not something he fights for or even wants. Nor does he really have to change, and he doesn't. Brad Pitt is Dalton's stunt double and personal assistant Cliff Booth, whose path is even more frivolous than Dalton's. He legitimately doesn't seem to have any goals, and he's the same person with the same life and the same ambitions at the end as he is at the beginning. Tarantino even throws in a completely baffling piece of his backstory whose only functional purpose is, I guess, to create a somewhat funny interaction between him and Kurt Russell's character's wife, and then poof, it's irrelevant thereafter. These guys are fun to watch, and they both give exceptional performances, but they're swallowed by the film's narrative cavern, in my opinion. I think about it this way. If the Sharon Tate murder never happened, there would actually be no functional plot for the audience to follow along with. And one of my favorite YouTube channels, The Discarded Image, published a great video essay on how Tarantino uses meta storytelling for context in his films, and how this movie is the most extreme realization of that. Now, I'll post that in the description below if you're curious. I certainly understand, or think I understand, what Quentin Tarantino was aiming for with this movie, but for me, personally a big Tarantino fan, it really did not work, and I was incredibly disappointed. I'm grading the story and plot a minus. I'm grading the structure and pace a neutral. Characters are also a neutral, and the dialogue is a single plus. A note on the dialogue: there are a couple instances where it seems like Tarantino is just simply expressing a personal pet peeve to the audience, doesn't really have any effect on the story or even the characters. And then there are some times where it's pretty clear, at least in my interpretation, that Tarantino just wants to watch really famous actors and really talented actors saying the words that he's written, really flexing his muscles, kind of showing off. However, the dialogue is very good, and almost all of the dramatic and emotional, I think, intrigue comes from the dialogue here. So it is a plus in my book. Cinematography is a double plus. Robert Richardson has worked with Quentin Tarantino since the first Kill Bill. I think that's 5 or 6 movies. And some of the shit he does with the camera in this movie is just mind-blowing. There is a sequence where Brad Pitt is driving into his trailer lot, and the camera is set up as a static shot. When Brad Pitt's character turns, it pans, so then it's a pan shot, and then it cranes, and I'm like, all right, this is a crane shot. And then, I don't know if it stayed on a crane, they have some crazy, ridiculous rig that they used, or if it was actually a drone shot. I really don't know how they did it, but it was absolutely incredible. Direction, I'm giving a plus here. Editing is a plus. A lot of the tonal comedy comes from the editing. There are some really confusing interjectory cuts that either didn't make sense or flew over my head, and I really don't want to admit the latter right now, so I'm going to go ahead and blame the editing. VFX, it's hard to say here. I'm sure that there were a lot of geographical effects, like background effects and green screen, stuff like that, but I don't have enough to really judge the visual effects on here, so I'm just going to kind of ignore that for the sake of this review. And then score and music, a plus. My final thoughts here: this is Tarantino's most meta film, and in my opinion, it's also his most unengaging. I don't think that that's a coincidence. Maybe you disagree. I'm rating Once Upon a Time in America a 5 out of 10. In my view, the lowest rated Quentin Tarantino film. If you love this movie, let me know why. I'm really curious because it just completely dumbfounded me. Anyway, that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, comment in the comment section. I'll try to respond to everything. So that's it, guys. Thank you a bunch. And I'll be posting my next review hopefully early next week.